Listen, I don't think we should get to the stage of a constitutional crisis, but we are in a bit of a crisis. Let's be quite clear. We're already in a crisis. This country's been paralysed for 3 years.
Well, then have an election.
We had a referendum.
Have an election.
We had a referendum. Well, wait a minute. Why should we have an election? Why should we be asked to go and vote again if this country simply refuses to enact the result of the referendum?
We're paralysed. An election,
so
you will have a result.
So what we need to do is actually honour the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. That's it.
The woman in the pink top. No, the woman behind you. I'll come to you, sir.
You say that Michael Gove will get a deal through Parliament, but how on earth is any deal going to get through Parliament, given that we've got John Bercow as the Speaker, who at every opportunity stops everything because it's clear that he supports the remaining in the European Union?
Woman there in the dress.
Yeah, I find myself in the tricky position of agreeing with Piers. And you're an Arsenal fan, which is really bad. But I actually think the problem is Parliament itself. You have 650 MPs who had a clear mandate. I don't care how you add the figures up and how we look at them. It was leave or remain, leave one, and because of personal agendas, and that's what it is, from both sides of the House, from all parties. They've got their own personal agendas as to what they want to do, and that has stopped your primary role, which is to enact the democratic will of the people. And we're just fed up, and it's undermining everything at the moment.
Totally agree.
Okay. I'm going to take another question before we end the programme tonight, which is particularly apposite today, from Gwen Porter.
Theresa May said those who served during the D-Day landings belong to the greatest generation. Will future generations be as great?
Ooh, that's food for thought, isn't it? Alison, do you want to kick us off?
I think future generations will certainly struggle to do what those people did. I mean, the stories that we've been reading over the last few days are just very humbling. And I think the stories of what the people achieved, those men achieved when they came out of the air or they arrived up on the beaches are extraordinary. But then it's when they say how terrified they were as well. And those men, they were that terrified, but they did it anyway. And I think that's very humbling when you see that, and that the sense of self-sacrifice, which is something I think perhaps we have lost now, where too often we can put ourselves before others, which was what got us through that situation then. And I think the way the Queen also has, and she too, she mentioned resilience, which is a thing that generation has. And I really hope that we can encourage and we can build that in our young people, because we're certainly going to need it in the future.
Annalise? I mean, it begs the question, does a generation have to have been through a war to be that great?
Well, I think they certainly need to ensure that they understand and know about that conflict. And for me, it's been particularly poignant to see that, of course, so many of the people who were involved in the commemorations today and for the rest of the week, sadly, probably will not be with us in future momentous commemorations. And that means we've got to work a lot harder to make sure that everybody is aware of what they did. I mean, I was talking to my kids about it this morning, and I was saying to them what happened, how people came off those boats. They had no idea what was going to greet them, literally no idea. Some of them talking about literally, jumping into, in their words, seas filled with blood. And they did that because they knew they had to do it to liberate another country, of course.
So Gwen's question is, can future generations be as great?
Well, I think the most important thing in trying to ensure they will be is making sure that this is never forgotten. And, we're in a similar position, I would argue, actually, when it comes to some of the other horrendous events. Of course, within that war, the fact that those who survived the Holocaust are sadly dwindling in number now as well. And it is harder to convey that experience, I think, when you don't have that personal connection. So we've got to work much harder. Education is a big part of it, I think, to make sure every school is making sure that all the children understand what was done for us.
What's your view, Gwen?
I would absolutely not want to put another generation through that in order to see whether they had the strength and the mettle to be like that previous generation. But I do feel that we've lost the altruism, the sense of behaving for society, not just me. I also think that we've lost the personal dignity and discipline that previous generations have had. And I really worry and wonder whether we would get the same response from the next generation if we called them to do the same thing.
Man in the blue shirt.
I think you do our young people down in service. We've just gone through, in very recent years, fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, where young 18-year-olds were stepping up to the plate. Unlike the people in 1945, where they would have had it reported in print media, they have seen it in upfront technicolor glory, and that has had absolutely not stopped them to come forward, serve in the armed services, knowing just how many people are having their limbs blown off and their friends being killed. Much more reporting, much more awareness about the challenge that is facing them, and that did not stop them. I was very lucky to serve with some of those people, and if they can do that, and they can do that with an awareness which, knowing that you're going to step out in Sangin, and the patrol before you has been blown up, you've seen your mate come back, the new people, the new recruits are coming in, and they've seen on Facebook that this is what these people are going through, and they can do that, says there is the potential within our younger generations to step up to the plate if required. And, so that's what we should remember. They will do it if needed.
It's been incredibly moving and inspiring to hear the stories of courage and sacrifice that we've witnessed in the commemorations over the past couple of days, and I think it's been a fantastic way to remember that. We must remember that sacrifice as we go forward. But it is really important to remember that people can rise to greatness without the conflict and without war. And I'm very upbeat. One of the privileges of this job is to go around the schools in my constituency in the Highlands, and I'm very upbeat about the young people that are coming through, their commitment and dedication to their communities. And I think that we really need to create the conditions in this generation to make sure that those young people can rise as far as they can and to be as great as they possibly can. But I believe they not only have the potential to do that, but certainly from my experience, our young people have the potential to go even further in terms of their greatness.
Okay. The man there.
Yeah, hi. Apart from the age of these veterans, are they safe from prosecution?
Well, that's a whole other debate. If you'll forgive me, let's not get into that right now and in the dying minutes of the programme. The woman there in the striped T-shirt.
I'd say that part of supporting the history of our armed forces is also to support the ones that are currently serving. My brother is in the British Army. He went in at 16. He turned 18 in Afghanistan. He's still serving, and I think we need to be doing more to support the current military. We talk about PTSD. We also need to think about their living standards. And I know that my brother is serving with, when on home soil, they've got no oven, no microwave, they've got mouldy bathrooms. Let's look at the guys and girls that are currently serving for us, and let's give them the support that they need.
And for foreign and Commonwealth.
The woman there in the green top. The woman there in the green top.
I think as well that recently, with people bandying around the word fascist and Nazi and things like that as well, and taking it out of context, I think it kind of waters down as well exactly how horrific things were then. And I think that's way overused now as well. It's kind of bandied around just like a general insult, and I think people need to be mindful of that.
Well, Piers, the question is, will future generations be as great? What is your view on that?
I think absolutely they can be. I think a lot of it is down to leaders and leadership, inspiring countries. Winston Churchill did an extraordinary job in World War II, I think, in inspiring that generation to rally and defeat the Nazis. So I think leadership is, as we're seeing at the moment, this chronic lack of leadership is part of the problem in this country. I have a brother currently serving abroad as well, and he says that the new crop of young soldiers are as outstanding as any he's seen. So there's an amazing crop of very brave young men and women who are serving in the forces. But I think this thing the Queen touched on was really significant to me, resilience. Now, I'd love to take these D-Day heroes, before it's too late, take them on a tour of our schools and talk to our kids in a way that gives them proper perspective. All I keep reading about all the time, I've got 4 kids, is how this generation is so anxious about everything. They're so worried about everything. And I think, what are you really anxious about and worried about compared to that generation? You know, we seem to be going a little bit soft. And even if you say that, you get criticised by the snowflake brigade. But I think it's important to say it. I do think we need to toughen up. We need to be more mentally resilient. We need to understand perspective. You know, the planet right now is the safest it's ever been. We're living longer and we're living healthier. We're more prosperous than we've ever been. Not for everybody, but generally speaking, it's a pretty damn good time to be alive. That generation, I watched the pictures, the moving footage of these guys going off those boats into the unknown with their friends, knowing many wouldn't come back. You can't even imagine what was in their heads. And so the question is, will this generation or the next one be as great? Well, yes, but let's stop the victimhood culture. Let's stop the blame culture. Let's have some ownership of you and your life and your responsibilities. And let's just toughen up a bit as a country. And let's look at these images from D-Day. And let's remember the reason that they fought and sacrificed many of their lives was for our freedom to be as great in future generations. So let's make sure we are.
OK. Nikki.
I think it's right that they did sacrifice their lives in many cases for our freedom. And the fact that we're having a debate like this and we're able to have free speech, going back to the protests we started the programme, is a mark of the country that they have left behind and created for us. But I was struck with your question. I mean, I hope in a way that this generation is not going to have to be as brave, because we hope we're not going to go through a conflict like that again, because we talked about serving soldiers, but of course many, many civilians. I think that's what's been revealing about the D-Day, was how many French civilians were killed in Normandy and caught up in the battle. But as a former education secretary, I had a privilege of going around many schools. We're sitting in a school tonight, and actually I think we've got some remarkable young people in this country who are fantastic. And the other thing that struck me recently was listening to the inquest into the London Bridge stabbings, was how brave people were in terms of taking on our police forces who do every day go into danger. People are like our paramedics and others. I absolutely think that if it was needed, yes, we would step up to the plate and future generations would be as brave, but I suspect they'll end up being tested maybe in a completely different way, sadly.
Well, with that, we are out of time. How lovely to end on a subject like that, and with the greatest respect, not on Brexit and other things, but just to reflect for a moment on what have been such intensely moving images today. I'm really glad we had time for that question. Our next programme is in Brecon, and the following week we will be in Tottenham. So you probably know the number by now, call 0330 123 9988. Tottenham in North London.
God, I swerved that one.
Yeah, we might think...
Don't rise to it.
No. Thank God we swerved you on that was what I was thinking. Anyway, if you'd like to be in the audience, that's the number to call, or you can go to the Question Time website. You can follow the instructions there. And if you want to have your say on tonight's topics, as always, you can join Adrian, Charles and guests on Question Time Extra Time, and that is on 5 Live right now. But for now, thank you very much to my panel, to all of you for coming here this evening, and of course to you at home for watching and listening from Thetford. Bye-bye.
And if you've still got room for more Brexit in your life, listen to the Brexit cast for all the geeky gossip available on BBC Sounds, which is available to download now.